The airplane shuddered, a violent jolt that sent coffee cups skidding across tray tables and gasps rippling through the cabin. Marcus Tate, 28, gripped the armrests of his seat in economy, his jaw tight as he muttered, "Great, some rookie pilot's gonna crash us into the Pacific." Beside him, a man in a crisp suit, early 30s, black with a calm demeanor, glanced over, his eyes sharp but unreadable, before returning to his book. The flight from Chicago to San Francisco was supposed to be routine, but turbulence had a way of exposing people's true colors. Marcus, a brash software engineer with a chip on his shoulder, leaned toward his seatmate, a woman in her 50s clutching a rosary. "Bet it's that guy up front," he said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Saw him in the terminal, missing half his arm. No way he's flying this thing right." Snickers erupted from a few rows back, but the man in the suit stiffened, his fingers pausing on the page. The intercom crackled. "This is Captain Elena Ruiz, your co-pilot. We're hitting some rough air, but Captain James Harlow has everything under control. Please remain seated." Marcus scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Harlow? Sounds like a discount pilot. Bet he got the job out of pity." The woman beside him shifted uncomfortably, but the man in the suit closed his book with a deliberate thud. Marcus didn't notice. In the cockpit, Captain James Harlow, 38, adjusted the controls with his left hand, his right arm ending just above the elbow, a prosthetic tucked neatly into his sleeve. His focus was razor-sharp, navigating the storm with the precision of a man who'd flown combat missions before transitioning to commercial airlines. Beside him, Elena monitored the instruments, her voice steady as she relayed updates. "You good, Jim?" she asked, glancing at his calm profile. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Just another day." Back in the cabin, the turbulence eased, but Marcus's commentary didn't. He leaned toward the woman again, smirking. "Bet they're scrambling up there. Probably shouldn't let a guy like that fly, you know? Safety first." The man in the suit finally spoke, his voice low but cutting. "You ever consider he might be better at his job than you are at yours?" Marcus froze, caught off guard by the intensity in the man's gaze. "What's your deal, man?" he shot back, but the stranger just shook his head and returned to his book. The plane landed smoothly at San Francisco International, the cabin erupting in applause. Marcus muttered something about getting lucky, but the man in the suit was already standing, pulling a leather briefcase from the overhead bin. His name, embroidered on the strap, caught Marcus's eye, Julian Carter. It sounded vaguely familiar, but Marcus brushed it off. He had bigger things to worry about, like his new job at Apex Innovations, a tech giant in Silicon Valley. Tomorrow was his first day, and he was determined to make an impression. Julian Carter stepped off the plane and into the cool San Francisco evening, his mind already shifting to the week ahead. As CEO of Apex Innovations, he was used to long flights and longer workdays, but something about Marcus's careless words lingered. He'd heard worse. Being a black, openly gay man in corporate America came with its share of slights, but the casual cruelty in Marcus's tone had struck a nerve. Julian wasn't one to hold grudges, but he made a mental note of the man's face. Silicon Valley was smaller than people thought. Marcus, meanwhile, checked into a sleek hotel in downtown San Francisco, his confidence buoyed by the city's energy. He'd landed a dream job as a lead developer at Apex, a company known for its cutting-edge AI and ruthless meritocracy. At 28, he was young, hungry, and certain he'd climb the ranks fast. His only worry was the mysterious new CEO, some guy named Julian Carter who'd taken over after the last one stepped down amid a scandal. Marcus hadn't bothered to Google him, Why would he? He'd meet the guy soon enough. The next morning, Marcus strode into Apex's glass-walled headquarters, his tailored blazer and cocky grin in place. The lobby buzzed with energy. Coders hunched over laptops, executives in sharp suits, and a massive digital display showcasing Apex's latest AI breakthroughs. Marcus felt like he belonged. He was ushered into a conference room for the new hire orientation, where a dozen other recruits sat around a polished table. At the front, a man in a navy suit stood with his back to them, writing on a whiteboard. Marcus leaned back in his chair, already sizing up the competition. Then the man turned around. Julian Carter's eyes locked onto Marcus's, and the room seemed to shrink. "Welcome to Apex," Julian said, his voice smooth but commanding. "I'm Julian Carter, your CEO." Marcus's stomach dropped. The guy from the plane, the one he'd ignored, the one who'd heard every word of his rant about the pilot. Marcus forced a smile, but his palms were sweating. This was not how he'd planned to start his dream job. Julian's orientation speech was sharp, inspiring, and laced with a quiet intensity that made Marcus squirm. He talked about Apex's mission to push boundaries, to challenge assumptions, and to build a culture where talent, not prejudice, defines success. "We don't tolerate small minds here," Julian said, his gaze lingering on Marcus for a split second longer than necessary. The other recruits nodded, oblivious to the subtext, but Marcus felt the weight of every word. After the meeting, Marcus tried to slip out, but Julian called him back. "Marcus Tate, right?" Julian's tone was neutral, but his eyes were unyielding. "I'd like a word." The room emptied, leaving them alone. Marcus braced himself, expecting a lecture, but Julian's approach was disarming. "I heard you on the plane," he said, leaning against the table. "You made some assumptions about a man you've never met. Care to explain?" Marcus stammered, his usual bravado crumbling. "I didn't mean anything by it. Just joking around, you know?" Julian raised an eyebrow. Joking about a man's disability? About his ability to do his job? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing he had no defense. Julian didn't raise his voice, but his words cut deep. "You're here because you're talented, but talent isn't enough if you don't respect the people around you. Do better." The rest of the day was a blur. Marcus threw himself into his work, coding furiously to prove his worth, but Julian's words echoed in his head. He wasn't used to being called out. Not like that. And yet, something about Julian's calm authority made him want to prove himself, not just as a coder but as a person. He didn't know it yet, but that moment in the conference room was the first crack in the armor of his arrogance. Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into his role at Apex, determined to redeem himself. The company's fast-paced environment suited him, but Julian was a constant presence, leading meetings, reviewing code, and challenging the team to think bigger. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Julian was watching him, waiting for him to slip up, but he also noticed something else. Julian was brilliant, charismatic, and fiercely dedicated to his team. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a leader who inspired loyalty. One evening, Marcus stayed late, debugging a tricky algorithm. The office was quiet, the city lights twinkling through the windows. Julian appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked, offering one to Marcus. It was the first time they'd spoken one-on-one since the orientation. Marcus hesitated, then took the coffee. "Trying to keep up," he said, managing a small smile. They talked, first about the project, then about San Francisco, then about life. Marcus was surprised by how easy it was to open up to Julian. He learned that Julian had grown up in Atlanta, fought his way through a cutthroat industry, and come out as gay in his 20s, defying expectations at every turn. Marcus found himself sharing his own story. Growing up in a small Ohio town, always feeling like he had to prove he was the best. "I guess I got carried away on that plane," he admitted, his voice low. "I'm not that guy." Julian studied him for a moment. "I believe you," he said finally, "but you've got to show it." It was a challenge, not a judgment, and Marcus felt a spark of something he couldn't name. Respect, maybe, or something deeper. As Julian left, Marcus realized he was starting to see his boss in a new light, not just as a CEO, but as a man. The San Francisco fog rolled in, cloaking Apex's headquarters in a misty haze. Marcus arrived early each morning, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder, determined to prove himself. Julian's words from that first day lingered like a challenge he couldn't ignore. He wasn't just coding for a paycheck anymore. He wanted to earn Julian's respect. But the more he observed Julian, the more he noticed the man's quiet strength, his sharp wit, and the way he made everyone around him feel seen. Marcus wasn't sure when admiration started to feel like something else. Something that made his pulse quicken when Julian leaned over his desk to review his work. Apex was gearing up for a major product launch, an AI platform that could revolutionize healthcare diagnostics. Marcus's team was tasked with optimizing the core algorithm, and the pressure was intense. Deadlines loomed, tempers flared, and Marcus found himself working late nights alongside his colleagues, including Sarah, a whip-smart data scientist, and Leo, a reserved but brilliant UI designer. Julian was a constant presence, rallying the team with a mix of encouragement and tough love. "This isn't just code," he told them during a late-night meeting. "This is about saving lives." One evening, as the team huddled over pizza and laptops, Julian pulled Marcus aside. "Your work's been solid," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "But I need you to step up as a leader. The team's looking to you." Marcus blinked, caught off guard. Leadership wasn't his thing. He was a coder, not a manager. But Julian's confidence in him felt like a lifeline. "I'll try," Marcus said, and Julian's slight nod felt like a victory. As weeks passed, Marcus threw himself into the role, mentoring younger coders and bridging tensions between team members. He started to see the bigger picture, not just lines of code but the human impact of their work. And he couldn't help but notice Julian more. How he stayed late to help a struggling intern. How he deflected praise to his team. How his laugh lit up the room. Marcus told himself it was just respect. But late at night, alone in his apartment, he couldn't shake the image of Julian's steady gaze. The launch was 3 weeks away when disaster struck. A critical bug in the algorithm surfaced during testing, threatening to derail the entire project. The team scrambled, pulling all-nighters, but tempers were fraying. During a heated meeting, Sarah snapped at Leo over a design flaw, and Marcus stepped in, defusing the tension with a calm suggestion that surprised even himself. Julian, watching from the corner, gave him an approving nod. It was small, but it made Marcus's chest tighten. That night, Marcus stayed late, digging through lines of code to find the bug. Around midnight, Julian appeared with takeout from a nearby taco truck. "You're still here," Julian said, setting the food on the desk. "Figured you could use this." They ate in silence at first, the hum of the office servers filling the air. Then Julian spoke. "You've changed since that first day. I see it." Marcus swallowed hard, the weight of his earlier mistakes crashing back. "I was an idiot on that plane," he said quietly. "I didn't know you or that pilot or anything, really." Julian leaned back, his expression unreadable. "We all make mistakes. It's what you do after that matters. Marcus met his eyes, and for a moment, the air between them felt charged, like a storm about to break. The next day, Marcus overheard a conversation in the break room. Sarah was talking about Julian's partner, a chef who just opened a restaurant in the Mission District. Marcus's stomach sank. Partner? He hadn't even considered that Julian might be with someone. The realization hit harder than it should have, and he buried himself in work to avoid thinking about it. But late at night, when he couldn't sleep, he wondered why it hurt so much. The bug was fixed, but the launch was still a high-wire act. Marcus's team pulled together, and he found himself taking on more responsibility, coordinating with other departments and presenting updates to Julian directly. Their interactions were professional, but there was an undercurrent Marcus couldn't ignore. A glance that lingered too long, a smile that felt personal. He told himself he was imagining it. Julian was his boss and he had a partner. End of story. But then came the team's first big win. A test run of the AI platform correctly diagnosed a rare condition in a simulated patient, and the office erupted in cheers. Julian called an impromptu celebration, ordering drinks and music for the team. As the night wore on, Marcus found himself standing next to Julian on the office rooftop, the city skyline glittering below. "You did good," Julian said, clinking his glass against Marcus's. "I knew you had it in you." Marcus's heart raced. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in his throat. Julian's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his expression softening. "My partner," he said, almost apologetically. "Gotta take this." He stepped away, leaving Marcus staring at the city lights, his chest aching with something he wasn't ready to name. The launch was a success, splashed across tech blogs and medical journals alike. Apex's stock soared, and Julian was hailed as a visionary. Marcus should have been thrilled. His code was at the heart of it, but he couldn't shake the hollow feeling that had settled in his chest. He'd started to care about Julian, not just as a boss but as something more, and it was impossible. He threw himself into new projects, hoping work would drown out his thoughts. But Julian was everywhere, leading strategy sessions, dropping by Marcus's desk with feedback, even inviting the team to his partner's restaurant opening. Marcus declined the invite, citing a deadline, but the truth was he couldn't face seeing Julian with someone else. Sarah noticed his mood and cornered him in the break room. "You okay, man? You've been off." "I'm fine," Marcus lied. But Sarah's raised eyebrow told him she wasn't buying it. "It's just Julian. He's intense, you know?" Sarah laughed. "Yeah, he's a lot, but he's fair. And his boyfriend, Ethan? Total sweetheart. You should come to the restaurant thing." Marcus forced a smile, but the name Ethan felt like a punch. That night, alone in his apartment, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He called his older sister, Lena, back in Ohio. "I think I'm in over my head," he admitted, his voice low. Lena listened as he poured out the story, the plain Julian, the way he couldn't stop thinking about him. "Sounds like you've got it bad," she said gently. "But Marcus, you've got to be honest with yourself. And with him." Marcus hung up, his mind spinning. He'd never thought of himself as anything but straight, but Julian had turned his world upside down. The next day, he resolved to keep things professional, to bury whatever he was feeling. But fate had other plans. During a late-night coding session, Marcus and Julian ended up alone in the office again. They were reviewing a new feature, their heads bent over the same screen, when Julian's hand brushed against Marcus's. It was fleeting, but it sent a jolt through Marcus's body. He pulled back, flustered, and Julian noticed. "You okay?" Julian asked, his voice soft. Marcus couldn't lie. I don't know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're making it hard to focus. Julian's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't pull away. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the air heavy with unspoken words. Then Julian's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. I should go, he said, but his voice was strained. Marcus spent the next few days in a fog, replaying that moment in his head. He knew he was crossing a line, but he couldn't stop. When Julian invited the team to a charity gala, Marcus went, hoping for a chance to clear the air. The event was held at a sleek venue overlooking the bay, with live music and glittering lights. Julian looked sharp in a tailored tux, but Marcus noticed the tension in his smile. Something was off. Halfway through the night, Marcus found Julian alone on a balcony, staring at the water. You don't seem like yourself, Marcus said, stepping closer. Julian sighed, running a hand through his hair. Ethan and we broke up, he said quietly. It's been coming for a while. Marcus's heart leapt, then sank with guilt. I'm sorry, he said, meaning it. Julian shook his head. Don't be. Sometimes things just don't work. They stood in silence, the city's hum filling the space between them. Then Julian turned to him, his eyes searching. Why did you say I was making it hard to focus? Marcus's throat tightened. He could lie, play it safe, but Lena's words echoed in his head. Be honest. Because I can't stop thinking about you, he said, his voice raw. And I don't know what to do about it. Julian's expression was unreadable, a mix of surprise and something Marcus couldn't place. The gala's music drifted through the open doors, but the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Marcus, Julian said finally, his voice low. You don't know what you're saying. But Marcus shook his head, stepping closer. I do. I've never felt like this before, and it scares the hell out of me. But I know it's real. Julian looked away, his jaw tight. I'm your boss, and I'm not in a place to start anything. Not now. Marcus felt a pang, but he nodded. I get it. I just needed you to know. He turned to leave, but Julian's hand caught his arm. Wait, Julian said, his voice softer. I don't know what this is either, but I'm not saying no. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Marcus and Julian kept things professional at work, but there were moments, a shared glance, a lingering conversation, that hinted at something more. Marcus was learning to navigate his feelings, questioning everything he'd thought he knew about himself. He started researching, reading about queer identities, talking to Lena, even attending a local LGBT support group. It was overwhelming, but it felt like coming home. Julian, meanwhile, was grappling with his own doubts. He'd spent years building walls, protecting himself from judgment in a world that wasn't always kind to a black gay man. Marcus was a risk, young, untested, and still figuring himself out. But there was something about Marcus's earnestness, his willingness to grow, that chipped away at those walls. One evening, Julian invited Marcus to his apartment for a work discussion that quickly turned personal. They sat on the balcony, the city sprawling below, and talked for hours about their pasts, their fears, their dreams. Marcus admitted he'd never dated a man before, and Julian confessed he was scared of getting hurt again. I don't know if I'm ready, Julian said, but his hand found Marcus's, and neither pulled away. The turning point came during a company retreat in Big Sur. The team spent the weekend hiking, brainstorming, and bonding by a campfire. On the second night, Marcus and Julian slipped away, walking along a cliffside trail under a starlit sky. The ocean crashed below, and Marcus felt bold, alive. I want to be with you, he said, his voice steady. I don't care if it's messy or complicated. I want to try. Julian stopped, the moonlight catching his eyes. You're sure? He asked, and Marcus nodded. I've never been more sure. They kissed then, tentative at first, then fierce, the weight of months of tension melting away. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise, a leap into the unknown. Back at Apex, they kept their relationship quiet, not out of shame but to protect their team's dynamic. But Sarah and Leo noticed the change. Marcus's newfound confidence, Julian's softer smiles. When the truth came out, the team was supportive, some even teasing Marcus about his glow-up. But not everyone was happy. A senior executive, Richard, made snide comments about Julian's leadership, hinting that his personal life was a distraction. Marcus overheard and confronted him, his old brashness flaring. You got a problem with Julian, you say it to his face, he snapped. Richard backed off, but the tension lingered. Apex faced its next challenge. A rival company, Nexus, accused them of stealing proprietary code. The lawsuit threatened to tank Apex's reputation, and Julian was under fire. Marcus watched him shoulder the stress, working late nights to prepare a defense. One evening, Marcus found Julian in his office, head in his hands. I can't lose this company, Julian said, his voice breaking. Marcus knelt beside him, taking his hands. You won't. We'll fight this together. Marcus rallied the team, digging into the code to prove it was original. He worked with Sarah and Leo, combing through years of commits, and found evidence that Nexus had actually copied Apex's open-source contributions. The discovery was a game-changer, and Julian presented it in court, his calm authority silencing the opposition. Apex won, and the victory cemented Julian's reputation as a leader. But the fight wasn't over. Richard, bitter over being sidelined, leaked details of Julian and Marcus's relationship to a tech blog, framing it as a scandal. The story spread, and Apex's board demanded answers. Julian faced them head-on, refusing to apologize for who he was or who he loved. My personal life doesn't change my ability to lead, he said, his voice unwavering. Marcus stood by him, proud and unafraid. The board backed down, and the team rallied around Julian, their loyalty fiercer than ever. Marcus, too, had changed. The man who'd once mocked a pilot for his disability was now someone who stood up for what was right, who loved fiercely and without shame. He and Julian moved forward, building a life together, messy, imperfect, but theirs. One evening, they stood on a San Francisco rooftop, the Golden Gate Bridge glowing in the distance. Marcus took Julian's hand, the city's lights reflecting in his eyes. I was wrong about a lot of things, he said softly. But you're the best thing I got right. Julian smiled, pulling him close. We got this right, he said, and they kissed, the world fading away. Their story wasn't just about love. It was about growth, about challenging assumptions and building something better. Marcus had mocked a man he didn't know, but in learning to see others, he'd found himself, and a future he'd never imagined.